welcome to everyone in our audience today. This is the Open Payment Alliance webinar. I think we have a catchy title, but effectively this is the end result of the HTNG HEDNA 2-year-long process of creating a technical standard for the payment manager concept within the Open Payment Alliance. I'm going to introduce everyone in a second. While you're logging in, there's, as you can see on the screen, there's an opportunity to go to menti.com and use the code that's on the screen to let us know what city you're contacting us from. The goal here today is to try to make this a little bit interactive so that both our panelists and our participants in the audience are able to ask questions and have a real dialogue today. We're going to do a couple of polls early on to understand who we are and what our expectations are. We've got some polls later about some of the assumptions and findings that we're making. With that, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mike Carlo. I am proud to be on the HEDNA Board of Directors, and I'm the board liaison for most of the payment working groups, including the Open Payment Alliance. I run a little payment company called XanderPay, and have been happy to be part of this group from the beginning. With that, we have 3 esteemed panelists to join us today. I'd like to introduce them in, let's see, reverse height order. Dee, I think that means you go first, but I'm not 100% sure. Please, if you can, introduce yourself and explain your involvement with the group.
Sure. I'm Dee Thomas, and I'm a product director with Onyx Center Source. Obviously, we are involved in payments, so have very much interest in the capabilities that are being introduced here with the Open Payment Alliance. I've been co-chairing with Xavi, this working group on the HEDNA side, and very active and participating in the development of these OPA standards that we're going to be talking about today.
Very cool. Thank you. And Sandy, if you can join us next.
Sure. I am Sandy Angel. I am the Web Services Architect at HTNG, Hospitality Technology Next Generation. HTNG and HEDNA worked in partnership to create these Open Payment Alliance standards. And I was kind of heading up that effort from the facilitation side.
Thank you very much. And Xavi, last but not least.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I'm Xavi Ginesta. I'm with Voxel. I'm actually the founder of Voxel. We've been working on the electronic billing space in travel for 20 years already. And 5 years ago, we joined HEDNA, joined their B2B payments working group. And since then, we got involved also in the payments, in the B2B payments arena. We've been working closely with Dee and Mike and Sandy on the creation of this, I think, groundbreaking standard. So we're really excited to see it come to life. We've actually taken the lead in implementing a first operational version of it. And we're very happy with the preliminary results of the early pilots we've conducted. And we're completely sure that this is going to change the name of the game in B2B payments in this space. So happy to share our learnings with you guys.
Thank you very much. And as almost a perfectly placed reminder to, if you have any questions that you're interested in throughout the course of the next 50 minutes or so, please be sure to put them in the Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom. We have our first question, but before we get to our first question, as you can see from the first poll at Menti, we have quite a broad geographic diversity in our call. So for those of you in Singapore, thank you for giving up your evening sleep with us. For everyone else, thanks for joining part of your Tuesday with us. Sandy, we have a couple of other Menti polls, don't we? Should we move on to the next one?
We do. We'll move right on to the next one to get folks' input.
Thank you. And while we're looking at this next poll, Dee, there's a question for you from our.
And the
question is,
I was previously Derby.
It's a great way to start. I actually had forgotten about your Derby Soft days. It's it was Lanyon before that for a long period of time, if I remember correctly. Cool. Well, the goal today is to share both the update as to the technical recommendations. Dee is going to actually give us a high-level overview of what the group has accomplished over the past year, and that we promise that it's going to be between 5 and 7 minutes of slide time, and the rest of this is just going to be commentary. And again, we will engage the participants as much as you'd like to be engaged. We're going to talk about sort of why is this. Why do we feel this is a groundbreaking effort? What are some of the problems that we're solving? And then we're going to make some predictions later in today, and we'll have a discussion about those. So if we look at the last bit of this poll, actually it's a nice mix of people. So we need to tailor our message to everyone today. One of the things that we've discussed after this webinar is to eventually have more focused webinars for each of these groups. So for today, it'll be a very general one, and then we can work into more detailed end user friendly webinars over the next couple of months. Sandy, I think we have a good number of responses from here. I think we have one. Is it one more?
We have 2 more actually.
Okay, well let's zip through those, and then we'll head over to Dee. Any opening comments that anyone would like to make before we while we finish these polls and we move toward the presentation? Okay then. Oh, we have another question from. I feel like I'm a telethon host. I mean, Dee, it's lovely to see your face. Is the question. I don't think that's a question, but I'm going to assume it's a statement.
Thank you.
So we have a very good mix of companies here as well. Thank you to all of you for participating. Oh, wow, there's some great names and some new names on here. So for those of you who haven't joined us in the past, welcome. For those of you who have been involved with this process for a long time, thank you for your continued support. And let's move on to our last poll. I love this Menti interface. It's
helps things makes things a little interactive. So
yes, and also in the chat we also have San Francisco and Toronto represented. So I don't want to dismiss my fellow Californians nor our neighbors to the north. So so we've got a great cross section of job roles here. So I think the takeaway, and one of the reasons why we did do this was we wanted to really understand who was here so that we could provide an appropriate message to everyone. So I think as expected, the messaging today needs to be very broad. But as I said earlier, we will eventually move to more targeted webinars. I think the first one that we've looked at is a PMS focused one, but those details will be coming. With that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Dee. And Dee, if you'd like to share your screen. Sure. Hi, everyone.
Let me get this going here.
Thank you.
And I always have to switch this when I share on Zoom. There we go. All right. Well, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you're at. I see we have a lot of people in various places around here. Thanks for joining today. Before we get started, we thought it might be good to make sure everybody has a level playing field as far as their understanding of what the Open Payment Alliance is. There may be some folks on here who haven't dealt with it before, so we kind of wanted to give a little bit of a background. If you haven't participated in any of the OPA meetings at HEDNA conferences or joined any of the OPA calls, we wanted to give you a little opportunity to get some background on that. So let's start out kind of just talking a little bit about why the Open Payment Alliance exists. You know, it's often the case when you get people together at like HEDNA conferences and such, they start talking about challenges that they're having in their business and problems that they're trying to solve, and in hopes that maybe somebody else is having a similar problem and might have a better solution. And one of those problems that surfaced was around the payments for hotel bookings. So that's one of the things that came, you know, and primarily it was around the prepaid hotel bookings and processing the payments at the hotel that really arose as a problem there. The main thing to think about is we think of the technology, the distribution technology that's out there today that's managing hotel bookings. It's very focused on delivering those bookings. It's not about the payment. That's the thing that they do best, is getting those bookings delivered to the right folks, distributing the hotel rooms, the rates, the inventory. So there's really not a lot that was in that booking transaction other than the guarantee information. Historically, it was used for guarantee. As virtual credit cards started to evolve, you saw that little bit of payment information that was used for guarantee in a booking evolve into a way of delivering the virtual credit card information for the hotel booking. But again, very small little subsection of information about payments in that booking transaction. So there were attempts to add and make changes to the booking transaction, the distribution path for bookings, to add other information. For example, we had the virtual credit card indicator that that was attempted to put in place at some point in time, and that was was not adopted well. Again, I think all the players in the distribution channel for hotel bookings are very focused on the booking. That's what they do best. So one of the things that started to bring this to the surface as a problem was the fact that payment methods started to evolve. The virtual credit card was one of them, but there were other payment methods that required more information to be transmitted to the hotel. And if you think about the virtual credit card, you have information about when that card can be charged, what can be charged against it, how much can be charged. There's a lot of specific details that just didn't fit into the booking transaction. So what happened was the Open Payment Alliance came to fruition. We started to look at what this concept of a payment manager. And so the payment manager idea and separating the payment from the actual booking transaction was something that evolved with HEDNA. One of the things that we did was we partnered with HTNG to kind of take this payment manager concept, bring it to life in the form of APIs to be able to support the payment transaction and bring it out into its own path. So the HEDNA Open Payment Alliance kind of brought the idea forward, began working with HTNG to evolve the APIs. And then basically when we've completed the work in developing these APIs, and now the focus is going to be back with HEDNA and the Open Payment Alliance in encouraging industry adoption of the payment manager concept in HTNG APIs that were developed. So that's kind of what the working groups have been doing and how this came to fruition. So what is the payment manager concept? The payment manager concept, basically, if you think about what a channel manager does for bookings today, looking at the function that it performs, the payment manager is very similar, but doing it for payments. So the goal of the payment manager is managing the condition for payments as provided by the payor, the person that's making the payment, providing detailed instructions and ensuring the seamless flow of money into the recipient's bank account at the appropriate time. So it's the payment manager sitting there making sure everything gets delivered to the right place. So this allows the payment processing to be decoupled then from the booking, from the distribution process, but it caters to the needs that are unique to our industry for payments, and also allows for the growth of other payment methods beyond credit cards as well. This is kind of a diagram of where the payment manager sits in the process. These little B's here indicate this is the booking transaction flow from the travel company through to the hotel. And sitting down here in parallel with the channel manager is the payment path, and the PI indicates payment instructions passing from the booking engine through the payment manager and to the CRS or PMS. And also I wanted to point out the line here from the payment manager down to the different payment partners that the travel company and the hotel work with in order to process those payments. This is for a hotel booking, kind of what the flow looks like for a hotel booking. But what we've done in working in developing this API and this payment manager concept is it's really not limited to just hotel bookings. It could be utilized for other B2B payments within the industry between partners. It does not necessarily have to be tied to a hotel booking. So this is kind of illustrating, again, the players in this process. The payor and the payee may not necessarily be the travel company sitting on this side and the hotel sitting on this side, but in processing any of those types of B2B payments. There's a lot of opportunity for the the OPA and the HTNG APIs to develop what we do in payments today for the industry, not just related to booking transactions, but also for any types of payments transpiring between partners in the industry. So looking at the future and speaking about the future, I think the next thing we're going to take a look at today are a few predictions. So I will go ahead and stop sharing and take a look at what we have.
Well, thank you, Dee. That was a really good high-level summary. So, since you've been speaking, why don't we start with you? Like, what do you see as the real breakthroughs of the payment manager for the industry?
I think what I see is that with this new standard and this payment manager concept, it does open the door to other payment types being used in like the hotel booking process. I think there's been a lot of dependency on virtual credit cards, but just from the simplicity and the ease of use of those virtual credit cards, but in putting this payment manager concept in place and creating these standards, it does make it easier for other payment types to come into play, and maybe that's something that'll be beneficial to hotels as a cost savings if they're able to use other types of payments in this process. So I kind of think it really opens the door for other payment types to be more widely used.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we spent a lot of time in the discussions about this talking about right-sizing B2B payments, and not every payment is appropriate for every type of transaction. And I think the technical specifications sort of have been designed to identify that. I mean, Xavi, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about right-sizing B2B payments. What do you see as the breakthroughs or benefits of this topic?
So definitely that's one of them, what Dee was mentioning. Keep in mind that in the past, by past I mean yesterday, before the standard was published, whatever you wanted to do in terms of innovation in this space, in terms of types of payments, or whatever you could do with in terms of implementing sophisticated payment flows, different forms of payment, and etc., had to be supported by the distribution channel. And the fact that the distribution channel was not oriented to processing payments, but to processing bookings, made it impossible to innovate in this space. So I think that what Dee was mentioning is definitely one of the great breakthroughs of the Open Payment Alliance. But I think that beyond that, the fact that the Open Payment Alliance basically eliminates the reliance on the distribution channel by decoupling the payment channel from the booking channel. Now we can do anything we want with payments. Before we couldn't. Before we were limited to the capacities of the distribution channel, which essentially was sending a 16-digit card number together with the booking. That's how good it could get. That was it, right? So I'm convinced that the payment manager will definitely pave the road to the flourishing of a brand new B2B payment ecosystem in this space. And I think that this will open up endless use cases beyond just introducing alternative forms of payment and probably more cost-efficient forms of payment for certain scenarios. It will also open up opportunities for virtual credit cards to be used in much more efficient ways than they have been so far, with the ability to use straight-through processing and other things that were previously inconceivable.
Yeah, I think it's great. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's a great opportunity to let the folks do the things that they do best. So the distribution channel can focus on hotel distribution, and the payment channel, the payment managers can focus on the payment processing. There's some benefits there for both. For the payment channel, it kind of alleviates some of the work on the hotel side if they're able to work with a payment manager and have them make sure that they're getting paid. They don't have somebody sitting at the front desk that's trying to do that. They can focus on the guests and not about getting the money for that booking. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. One of the things we looked at as we went through this was the check-in experience and the ridiculous patchworks that we've provided for the legacy system, specifically faxing and faxing of details that go along with the virtual credit cards. And one of the things that my favorite hashtag for our working group is fax free by 2023. I mean, with the adoption of these technical specifications, we can really get rid of that that necessity, because the information can flow into the PMS and through the booking channel. Sandy, you've been involved with a number of projects in the hotel sector where specifications have been designed. What do you see as so critical and groundbreaking about this particular initiative?
I think there are many benefits to this initiative. And I kind of always come back to the fact that we're in the hotel business and we're here to serve guests, and being able to make that process seamless for them is just such a high priority. Being able to get through that check-in process seamlessly, having the check-in clerks be able to know what is being covered by these payments, and being able to explain that to the guest, and being able to have all that information at their fingertips, I think is really, really important. So I always, like I said, it comes back to the guest for me. And I think that, when you have a satisfied guest, they're going to return to the hotel, they're going to return to their booking channels that they use, and they're going to tell others about it as well.
That's a great point. We actually have a few questions, so I'd like to get to them. The first, when we talk about other type of payments, we're talking about Venmo, direct wires, crypto. I think the answer to that question is mostly yes. One of the things to keep in mind, the Open Payment Alliance is designed around B2B payments. So something like Venmo's probably not in scope, but we've designed the payment manager and the technical specifications to really be payment method agnostic. And I think that's really important to to the future, because the way payments are done today is going to be very different in 5 and 10 years. A second question, Xavi, I think this might be a good one for you. What happens to the invoicing, especially from the payer perspective? Does the payment manager help there, and does it help with the reconciliation process?
Yeah, that's a very important one. For certain players in the travel ecosystem, invoicing is not relevant, but for some others, it's crucial. Many companies, they need to get a tax compliant invoice for tax purposes or for whatever governance purposes. They need an invoice in order to pay. And sometimes this is difficult to get, especially if you've paid already with a virtual credit card. You send the booking with a credit card, and then you expect to get an invoice and you don't get it, you never get it. Then that becomes the known bill back problem. And also, even if you have to, if you pay after you receive the invoice, still you need to receive the invoice, you need to process it manually. So one of the big things that the payment manager incorporates is the ability to automatically process electronic invoices and to capture them from the PMS. So that's one of the things that will actually help streamline many of the use cases in B2B payments. Whenever an invoice is required, through the payment manager, you can actually obtain that invoice electronically and process it electronically, do the electronic reconciliation, automate all the different processes, trigger the payment, reconcile the bank account. Everything gets fully streamlined. That's one of the big things.
Great, thank you. So back to, I'm going to ask a question for everyone to answer, and I will go last, so I'll have to make up something if you guys use my answer. When we started this project, we had a really good sense of some of the benefits. There were some unanticipated benefits. Which ones do you think will have the most benefit? Which of the unanticipated benefits do you think will have the most impact? Sandy, since you went last time, would you like to go first?
Sure. Gosh, unanticipated benefits. I think there's just so many different benefits out there, but I think when we look at the ability to decrease some of the chargebacks and different types of errors that would happen in the processing, I think that we have the ability to kind of cut that back significantly.
That was definitely not one we had in mind, but as we worked with the card schemes, that really seemed to come to the forefront. Dee?
Well, kind of touching on the invoice discussion we were just having there, I think one of the things that we built into this model and the API is the ability to require an invoice before payment's issued. So in those cases where there's the agency or the travel company needs an invoice before they can issue payment to the hotel, that's something that can be built into the payment process, which doesn't exist today with the VCC. So the payment manager has the ability to hold that payment until that invoice has been, it's been marked that invoice has been received and it's ready to be paid. So I think that's kind of a nice benefit there, is better control and making sure that those required documents are available before the payment is issued.
That's great. Xavi?
Yeah. To me, there were really two things that I didn't expect before we started working on this. And as we started implementing the first early pilots and seeing what the benefits were and talking to many clients, we identified two things we never thought that were going to be actual drivers of the adoption of the solution. One of them is risk mitigation. We identified that some of the risk issues that came up with COVID could be actually addressed by streamlining the way payments were executed at certain timings, maybe a little before check-in, or depending on the different scenarios, because this industry is quite complex, and maybe sometimes there's a booking has to go through a series of hops from one B2B player to another B2B player to another B2B player before it gets to the hotel. And there's a payment involved in that sequence of a B2B payment involved in each hop in that sequence of actions. And orchestrating automatically how those payments are executed is very complex if you want to go by certain payment processing rules. And that can be done through technology, but unless you have payment specific technology like the one the payment manager provides, it's almost impossible because you rely on manual processing procedures, which are ever prone and they never work. Bill back, one of the problems we mentioned before, is one of those, right? That just fulfilling the requirement for an invoice when you rely on manual procedures is very difficult to accomplish. So that's the ability of the payment manager to mitigate risks is something that we didn't expect, and we found out it was a good opportunity. And the other one that we're exploring is the ability to generate transparency. So if you think about the block diagram that Dee showed before, where you have on one end, you have one payer, and at the other end, you have the payee. The payment manager is sitting in between them. And many times when it comes to, for instance, commission payments, one of the big issues that people have is that both ends of the equation don't know the information that each other has, right? So there's an OTA that expects to get a commission. There's a hotel that expects to pay a commission. And sometimes there's happened something with the booking that only one of the ends know and the other one doesn't. And then the expectations conflict with one another, and there's a mismatch in the payment expectations. So the payment manager has this ability to connect the information from the booking engine to the PMS and vice versa. And this ability to let information flow transparently from one end to the other, whether it's through an invoice or through commission information or through whatever, is really powerful, because one of the problems we have today is that the distribution channel does not allow for this communication relating to payments. So the payment manager will generate this transparency, and we'll see how little by little more and more companies start taking advantage of this transparency capabilities of the payment manager.
Well, thanks. You know, I was trying to decide between two things, and for my answer to this question, and then we have a question from Ralph, and so he addresses one of the two. So the first one I'm going to go with is I was surprised how much we learned about breakage over the course of this project. And breakage, for those of you who don't know, are the funds that are accessible on a virtual credit card that a hotel doesn't process. And what we've seen is breakage is a very significant cost to the industry that no one really can calculate. And by adopting the standard and by focusing on either straight through processing of credit cards or alternate forms of payment, breakage goes away. And for some OTAs that we've spoken to, it can be 1%, which is almost 1 to 2% in some cases, that cards are just not charged. And there was one hotel when we first started this project, one hotel, and I'm not going to give the brand name or the location, but they had not processed their virtual credit cards for a year, and they thought they had, but they hadn't. And so there was all this money that hadn't been charged. So the payment manager should do away with breakage. The second unanticipated benefit was related to hotel direct bookings. And there's a question from Ralph, a theoretical example, regional chain in the Middle East wants to open up payments by offering WeChat Pay, Alipay, Klarna, et cetera. What steps should they be taking with regard to technology? And really, that question combines two of HEDNA's active working groups: the guest-centric payments and really focusing on centralized payments. So as a brand, really focusing your payments on at a centralized level. One of the areas, an unforeseen areas that benefits of the payment manager is there is now an infrastructure in place that will facilitate centralized payments. So I think that as the industry moves towards payment centralization and a guest-centric payment strategy, I think the OPA concept of the payment manager will facilitate that. So Ralph, to your question, I think there are two pieces. One is to join our guest-centric working group, and the second is to use the payment manager as the infrastructure for the implementation of that. Anyone else want to add anything to after having heard everyone else's answers? All right. So I have a couple of specific questions before we get to predictions. The first specific question for Dee and Xavi. The group had input from all segments of the travel industry. And out of that came many use cases. Which use cases do you see as the first movers? And Dee, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the hotel booking. I think that's going to be that use case for this new payment transaction through a payment manager. They're going to see the most benefits. There's basically the hotels I think are going to benefit the most from it, and that's why I think that's going to be the most adoption, the greatest adoption, and what'll really take hold first. As you said, Mike, the breakage I think is a big benefit of the payment manager and the OPA APIs, and I think that's probably going to be the driver in adopting this and getting the widespread acceptance of using a payment manager. So basically the payment manager is going to be able to connect to the hotel's preferred card processor, be able to process that payment on behalf of the hotel, so the person at the front desk doesn't have to worry about it. That's where the breakage generally occurs. Somebody forgot to charge the VCC, or maybe they overwrote the VCC that came across in the booking with the guest credit card when the guest checked in. So now they've lost it and they haven't used it. I think having all of that sitting within the payment manager, it's not something that's sitting with the hotel, will make it a much cleaner process and ensure that the hotel's getting paid for the booking at the end of it. They're not leaving that money on the table.
Great, thanks. And Xavi?
Yeah, I think that all the use cases that we can identify, or at least the most interesting ones that we can identify as first movers, fall into three categories. To me, those categories are risk mitigation. I already talked about it before. The second one would be cost optimization, and the third one, transparency, which I also talked about before. So let me talk a bit about cost optimization now, which is the second one. I think that until now, because there was no payment manager and you were constrained to simply sending a credit card through the distribution channel, and that's how good it could get. Today, with the payment manager, you have a lot of degrees of freedom in terms of being able to innovate and to do more creative things with the way you handle payments. So from the perspective of an OTA, the first thing is that you no longer need to get connected to 20 different payment service providers individually, one by one. With one single connection to the payment manager, you get a whole ecosystem of payment service providers that you're directly connected to, and they may support a full range of different payment methods, ranging from credit cards to Bitcoins, bank transfers, and you name it, whatever you want. And what you can do once you have that capability in place, you can start thinking of what's the best way I can pay a given supplier in a certain region, taking into consideration the requirements of the supplier, which is also something that now we're going to listen more and more. The hoteliers are going to start requesting that they want to get paid one way or another, depending on the level of risk that they have with a certain player. Maybe if they have a contractual relationship with a certain OTA and they've been working for 20 years in a row, the form of payment that they will choose will not be the same one that if they've never worked with that OTA, if they don't have any contractual relationship and they're getting a booking through a GDS, for instance, right? So what we see now is that there's a huge opportunity for both ends to optimize the way they, or to optimize their costs in processing payments. And the payment manager facilitates that. So I think that's one of the most interesting use cases that we're seeing now, that people are actually contacting us to see the advantages of the payment manager.
Great, thank you. So Sandy, before we get to predictions, you get the last question. You know, we part of the name of the Open Payment Alliance is open. I mean, we've tried to design a standard which has been created to allow for the guest check-in experience, the guest experience to be the same regardless of where they go and how the payment is happening. Given that desire for consistency, what's the importance from your perspective of having the HTNG technical specifications for this solution?
Well, I think really it's all about interoperability, right? So being able to provide those open set of standards so folks can interoperate with each other is really key. You know, I can envision multiple payment managers in the ecosystem and folks needing to connect to those payment managers, and the payment managers needing to connect to many hotel companies and many booking channels. And so being able to have that standard set of messages and being able to share that information in a standard format allows you to connect to those folks seamlessly from one relationship to the next. So it's just, you know, it makes that whole process easier, less time and resource intensive. Those specifications that we've put together for this include a lot of information besides the actual messages that can be exchanged. We put a lot of work in going through and laying out these different use cases, putting together different composite scenarios so folks can really understand how these messages can be used in the different scenarios and business cases they can be used in. So there's a lot of great information in the specification aside from having those, you know, standard APIs themselves.
Very cool, thank you. So are you the keeper of the predictions? So we've decided to do something a little bit different. We as a group have come up with 4 predictions, and I will say one of the group of 4 of us did most of the predicting, but we all agreed. We'd like to get your initial thoughts on which ones you think are, what your ranking of most critical is. So I don't know, Jessica, if you can.
I think we have Jessica. Yeah.
Yes, I can launch the first one.
Perfect. So really we have 4 predictions. One, that over 80% of the B2B payments in the hospitality space will be processed through a payment manager. And the goal here is which would you most like to see come true. Cost optimization, risk mitigation, and end-to-end transparency will become a trending topic. The industry-wide adoption of the payment manager will fuel all of them. Third, end-to-end frictionless payment processing will be the new normal. Efficiency will replace breakage and rebates, and then VCCs will continue to be the predominant form of payment, but alternate forms of payment will gain traction in B2B spaces between trusted parties. So if you can all vote, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss each of them, but we're going to discuss them in the order preference ranking of you'd like to see come true. So we'll give it a minute. If they all end up tied, we don't have a procedure and we will have to wait till Georgia votes. All right, I think we're gonna start with, all right, I think we can end the poll. We're gonna start with end-to-end frictionless payments and then work through the other 3. So with that, our first prediction will be, or is that end-to-end frictionless payment processing will be the new normal. Efficiency will replace breakage and rebates. Shavi, on this one, we've talked about the breakage concept a couple of times. What's your prediction about rebates here? Because we haven't discussed that word yet.
It's almost, we're almost too late for a prediction because it's already it's happening. What we've seen already is that MasterCard, there's been already many hotels that had been complaining about paying too high fees for acquiring a VCC, and that had been going on for quite a while. What's going on now is that because the payment manager is opening up the door to alternative forms of payment, which convey lower fees, then the companies in the virtual card space are taking action, right? So what we're seeing is, for instance, that MasterCard has already created different tiers. Their global wholesale program has been not replaced, but has been complemented with other programs that have tiers starting at 1%. I think it's 1.5 or something like that. So they have like different tiers that go up from 1% to 2%. So that's happening already. So when that happens, there's an obvious consequence, right? Which is that the part of that interchange fee that the issuer was getting when an OTA was paying a hotel, part of that fee was being shared between the issuer and the OTA. And if the pie gets smaller, there's less portions of pie to be shared, right? So that's what's happening. Those rebates that were very interesting for the OTAs are starting to shrink. And I don't know to what extent they're gonna disappear. I'm not sure. I cannot tell if they will eventually disappear completely, but they will definitely get smaller. They are already getting smaller. I don't know how smaller they will get, but it's already happening. This is not even a prediction, as I was saying.
Well, and I think it's really nice for for us as an industry to start to design payment systems with the hotels in mind. I mean, the rebate is a very interesting topic. Before we go to our next poll, Dee or Sandy, do you have any comments on this particular prediction?
I feel strongly that this is a very likely prediction, because it's going to become so much easier for the person getting paid to not have to worry about getting paid. It's gonna, that's, everybody loves that. Pay money. I don't have to do anything to get, to get my money or go collect my money. It makes everything so much less complicated, frictionless, as it says. And I just think that's going to make it very appealing for people to adopt the payment manager concept and the OPA standards to take advantage of that.
Great. Sandy, you're nodding your head, so I think we'll move to, for time purposes, we'll move to our next poll, which is with regard to this particular prediction. What is your projection that the likelihood of this prediction will come true? All right, well, we are skewing very, very high toward likely to almost certain. We have absolutely no naysayers, so thank you. If someone wants to be a contrarian, you can get your vote in before we end the poll. The second of the predictions was VCCs will continue to be the predominant form of payment, but alternate forms of payment will gain traction in the B2B transactions with trusted parties. I'll chime in first before asking you, Sandy. I mean, I think that the whole concept of right-sizing B2B payments and having the payment mechanism manage the payment mechanism to the risk of non-payment is absolutely critical. And for the complex relationships within the hotel sector, I think that that this prediction has to come true. What are your thoughts, Sandy?
No, I agree with you, and I think that the way we've written specifications really has opened this up. It'll make it easy to use all different types of B2B payment type methods, and I think that the that trust relationship is going to be kind of what drives that.
Dee, Xavi, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree. It's all a question of efficiency. As efficiency takes over, and the payment manager is an efficiency generator. As efficiency takes over, just by definition, everything becomes cheaper, right? That's why I was mentioning before that that rebates will disappear. VCCs will obviously continue to work to be the preferred method of payment. In fact, what I think is going to happen is that as we get more efficient, we'll see less and less non-electronic or non-virtual payments. Everything will be virtualized. There will be no more checks. That's going to disappear. So what's going to happen is that the pie of virtual payments will get bigger. Before that pie was essentially all concentrating on VCCs. Now what's going to happen is a portion of that pie is going to be taken over by other forms of payment. But because the pie will be bigger, I think that the overall volume of payments made with VCCs will actually grow, even though the percentually it will be smaller. Before it was 100%, it will no longer be 100%, but the overall volume of VCC payments will grow. But then there will be also room for alternative forms of payment. And what's definitely going to disappear are the other forms of payment like checks and things that make no sense nowadays.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, let's go to our next poll. So this prediction that VCCs will continue to be the predominant form, but alternate form payments will gain traction. What do you think? Is that unlikely or certain or somewhere in between? Interestingly, this one is skewing a little bit more toward the certain realm. Oh, we have one unlikely. That's great. We'll have to find that person and convince them when this is done. The third topic was cost optimization, risk mitigation, and end-to-end transparency will become a trending topic. The industry-wide adoption of Payment Manager will fuel all of them. Dee, what do you think about this prediction?
Again, I think that the risk mitigation is a big thing. The breakage and things like that are issues or challenges today that started the whole OPA initiative in the first place. Definitely, now that we have an option, there is the open the OPA specification now to support this. We have the payment managers that can take on this responsibility and eliminate some of that risk as far as making sure the payments are processed. That's definitely going to drive people to explore that. I don't think people had the option before, and now that we've got this available, that's going to become a definite trend, and people are going to want to take advantage of that.
And in the spirit of ending on time, I'm going to combine this and the last prediction, which 80% of our B2B payments in the hospitality space will go through a payment manager. I think what we do in the next 6 months will determine the outcome of this prediction. I think that we, as a combined HEDNA HDNG group, need to do what we can to foster the adoption of this standard. If we can go to the next poll, I think that the question is, what is the likelihood that we'll be able to achieve this adoption? We've actually learned lessons from the past. We worked together in the past on some VCC notifications, and we didn't continue. We created the specifications and then stopped. And what we've learned from that is, rather than stop, it's now where the hard part begins. Creating the technical specifications is great. We now need to learn how to engage the industry to adopt them. And so with that, I think that this question definitely, I agree with this assessment of the predictions. We have a couple of questions in our last 5 minutes from our participants. One, Xavi, D, Sandy, whichever one of you wants to address this. The payment manager will be interfacing with the PMSs. That is true, we hope. That is the expectation. How much of this is dependent on the hotel spending money to upgrade older systems?
Well, so there are two questions here, right? So the first one is if the payment manager will be interfacing with a myriad of PMSs or something else. The answer is yes. It will be interfacing eventually all PMSs and potentially many other systems. It will be interfacing booking engines. It will be interfacing channel managers, GDSs, everything that's out there that can be connected to the payment manager will be connected to the payment manager. Hopefully, the hotels will not pay these adoptions, because what's going to happen is that the same way that PMSs implemented the Open Travel Alliance standard in order to communicate with channel managers, they will also implement the Open Payment Alliance to connect with payment managers. So that's something that PMSs should do anyway, not to become obsolete. How fast is going to happen? That's the question. So the question to me is not whether they're going to do it or not, but how fast they're going to do it. And that's going to depend on how much pressure they feel from their customers, right? If they feel that implementing this specification gives them competitive advantage, they will do it. If not, they will wait and see. And eventually there will be a point where not implementing them will mean competitive disadvantage. And then they will end up implementing them as well. So that's what I expect to happen.
Great. I'm going to go to the next question. In terms of having payment secure, I suppose PSD2 supporting or 3D secure for credit cards and of course PCI. I think the payment managers are going to take away the PCI responsibility as part of this transaction. One thing to keep in mind is that this has been designed strictly for B2B payment processing. So when you start to look at actual consumer transactions, they're going to be different players involved. The last question, and we have 2 minutes remaining, for Sandy and Dee, what do distributors need to utilize the payment manager? If you could each answer in 30 seconds, and then we'll wrap up.
One of the things that that we talked about in developing the standard is the distributor is going to need to know whether they're going to be doing issuing the reference ID, the unique reference ID for processing the payment, and that's what's going to be passed then in the booking. So they're going to need to be able to pass, instead of sending a credit card across in the booking to the hotel, they'll be passing this reference ID that ties back to the record, the payment instructions that are stored in the payment manager system. So they'll need to make some changes in what's getting sent with that booking to handle that. There's also the ability for them to, if they don't have, or maybe they do and they want to move away from having that virtual credit card issued themselves and put that into the payment manager, they have the ability to push that off to the payment manager to handle the connection to the issuer and issuing that virtual credit card for payment, if that's the method of payment that they're choosing to use.
Thank you. Sandy?
I was going to say, just to add on to that, Dee mentioned that, there is the ability to send that ID through the booking channel. And I know we talked earlier about how we did have some problems getting the virtual credit card indicator to be adopted through the booking channel. So I just wanted to note that when we decided to provide that ability, we decided to use an existing field in the messages. So we're not asking anybody to implement new fields. These are fields that already exist, and there's a field that you can identify it through a code that it is a payment, this form of payment, and then you can pass that ID through. So that also is outlined in the specification. And I know, Mike, someone answered earlier where you can get those specifications at, and I did answer it in the question. But these specifications are available on the HTNG website. under htng.org. You just go to resources, technical specifications, and then you'll see an area for the Open Payments Alliance specific specification for download.
Well, that is the perfect ending. Thank you. Thank you to all of our participants listening for the last hour. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the kind words. And to Dee, Sandy, and Xavi, it has been an absolute pleasure to work with you guys on this. And everyone, we look forward to continuing these discussions in more focused webinars in the coming weeks. So thanks to everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mike.
All right.
Bye-bye.